Okay, so we're going to move on to lesson 3, and today we're going to continue reading Roald Dahl's Matilda from the chapter The Hat and the Super Glue. The following morning, just before the father left for his beastly second-hand car garage, Matilda slipped into the cloakroom and got hold of the hat he wore each day to work. She had to stand on her toes and reach up as high as she could with a walking stick in order to hook the hat off the peg, and even then she only just made it. The hat itself was one of those flat-top pork pie jobs with a jay's feather stuck in the hat band, and Mr. Wormwood was very proud of it. He thought it gave him a rakish, daring look, especially when he wore it at an angle with his loud checkered jacket and green tie. Matilda, holding the hat in one hand and a thin tube of super glue in the other, proceeded to squeeze a line of glue very neatly all around the inside rim of the hat. Then she carefully hooked the hat back onto the peg with the walking stick. She timed this operation very carefully, applying the glue just as her father was getting up from the breakfast table. Mr. Wormwood didn't notice anything when he put the hat on, but when he arrived at the garage, he couldn't get it off. Super glue is very powerful stuff, so powerful it will take your skin off if you pull too hard. Mr. Wormwood didn't want to be scalped, so he had to keep the hat on his head, and the whole day long, even when putting sawdust in gearboxes and fiddling the mileage of cars with his electric drill. In an effort to save face, he adopted a casual attitude, hoping that his staff would think that he actually meant to keep his hat on all day, just for the heck of it, like gangsters do in films. When he got home that evening, he still couldn't get the hat off. "Don't be silly," his wife said. "Come here, I'll take it off for you." She gave the hat a sharp yank. Mr. Wormwood let out a yell that rattled the window panes. "Ow!" he screamed. "Don't do that, let go! You'll take half the skin off my forehead." Matilda, nestling in her usual chair, was watching this performance over the rim of her book with some interest. "What's the matter, Daddy?" she said. "Has your head suddenly swollen or something?" The father glared at his daughter with deep suspicion, but said nothing. How could he? Mrs. Wormwood said to him, "It must be super glue. It couldn't be anything else. That'll teach you to go playing around with nasty stuff like that. I expect you were trying to stick another feather in your hat." "I haven't touched the flaming stuff," Mr. Wormwood shouted. He turned and looked again at Matilda, who looked back at him with large, innocent brown eyes. Mrs. Wormwood said to him, "You should read the label on the tube before you start messing with dangerous products. Always follow the instructions on the label." "What in heaven's name are you talking about, you stupid witch?" Mr. Wormwood shouted, clutching the brim of his hat to stop anyone trying to pull it off again. "Do you think I'm stupid? I'm so stupid I'd glue this thing to my head on purpose." Matilda said, "There's a boy down the road who got some super glue on his finger without knowing it, and then he put his finger up to his nose." Mr. Wormwood jumped. "What happened to him?" he spluttered. "The finger got stuck inside his nose," Matilda said, "and he had to go around like that for a week. People kept saying to him, 'Stop picking your nose,' and he couldn't do anything about it. He looked an awful fool." "Serve him right," Mrs. Wormwood said. "He shouldn't have put his finger up there in the first place. It's a nasty habit. If all children had super glue put on their fingers, they'd soon stop doing it." Matilda said, "Grown-ups do it too, Mummy. I saw you doing it yesterday in the kitchen." "That's quite enough from you," Mrs. Wormwood said, turning pink. Mr. Wormwood had to keep his hat on all through supper in front of the television. He looked ridiculous, and he stayed very silent. When he went up to bed, he tried again to get the thing off, and so did his wife, but it wouldn't budge. "How am I going to have my shower?" he demanded. "You'll have to do without it, won't you?" his wife told him. And later on, as she watched her skinny little husband skulking around the bedroom in his purple striped pyjamas with a pork pie hat on his head, she thought how stupid he looked. Hardly the kind of man a wife dreams about, she told herself. Mr. Wormwood discovered that the worst thing about having a permanent hat on his head was having to sleep in it. It was impossible to lie comfortably on the pillow. "Now, do stop fussing around," his wife said to him after he had been tossing and turning for about an hour. "I expect it will be loose by the morning, and then it'll slip off easily." But it wasn't loose by the morning, and it wouldn't slip off. So Mrs. Wormwood took a pair of scissors and cut the thing off his head, bit by bit. First the top and then the rim. where the inner band had stuck to the hair all around the sides and back. She had to chop the hair off right to the skin so that he finished up with a bald white ring around his head, like some sort of monk. And in the front, where the band had stuck directly to the bare skin, there remained a whole lot of small patches of brown leathery stuff that no amount of washing would get off. At breakfast, Matilda said to him, "You must try to get those bits off your forehead, Daddy. It looks as though you've got little brown insects crawling about all over you. People will think you've got lice." "Be quiet," the father snapped. "Just keep your nasty mouth shut, will you?" All in all, it was a most satisfactory exercise, but it was surely too much to hope that it had taught the father a permanent lesson. Okay, so your task for today is to look at what I've read to you, and if you were reading, when I was reading that, you thought, "Oh, I'm not sure about that word," you're going to have a little think about some words that you do not understand, okay? So you're going to think about the words that you don't understand from the text and that you don't know the meaning of, and then you're going to talk to an adult or look up the meaning. I know a couple of you in the past have used Google to have a little look and to translate what it means, to help you, a bit of an online dictionary, okay? So if you haven't got a handheld dictionary, you can always use the internet to help you, okay? And then you can record any words that you're not sure and explanations about what they mean on your sheet. And then I want you to summarise the key points of this chapter, okay? Remember, just include the main parts. Do not include all the extra bits, okay? So say, for instance, someone was to ask you what happens in the chapter about the hat and the super glue, rather than you sitting there and going, "Well," and telling me every single little detail, what would you include? Now, just to give you a bit of advice on this, if I was to say to you, so we've got here, the following morning, just before the father left for his Lee's second hand. We don't need to know that it was before he was going to work. All we need to know is what actually happened. So Matilda came up with a plan. We know at the end of the last chapter, she said that her dad was first on her list for the who she was going to sort of target for being horrible to her. So we don't even need to say that Matilda slipped into the cloakroom. They're the details that we don't need. All we need to know is Matilda took the hat, took her father's hat and put some super glue into it. And then you can then carry on from this. That would be your first point, okay? And then you can tell us a little bit more about how that then set a chain of events. But you don't even need to put, you see here where it says he thought it gave him a rakish, daring look. That's how he feels about the hat. That's not the details about what's important about this chapter. Okay, so remember, when we're summarising, make sure we've got bullet points in order of how they happened, and do not write too much, because it is just a summary so that we would get the gist, we'd get the idea of the chapter without reading it. Okay, and I will see you for the lesson tomorrow.